Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. In this video, I want to discuss, is it worth it? It's going to be a series where I go through different plugin companies and give my opinion as to whether or not their particular product line is in fact worth it. There's going to be a rubric here based on sound quality, workflow, selection, customer consideration and service, and price point. And with those 5 things considered, I will then make a recommendation as to whether or not I think that the company's product line is in fact worth it or not worth it. Now, the quick disclaimer I will be doing at the beginning of every one of these videos here is this is just my opinion. If I think something sounds good, that doesn't mean that you're going to think it sounds good. If I have a bad experience with a company, that doesn't mean you're going to have a bad experience with a company. And lastly, things change over time. So while this is being filmed, this is in the present, but in the future, things may not be the same. So let's start with our first company here, and that's going to be Waves. Waves is probably the most popular of all of the plugin companies. They've been around since the late 90s. They're pretty ubiquitous in just about every studio and pretty common amongst recording and mixing engineers. It's very rare that you hear a record that did not use a Waves product at some point in time. But with that said, is Waves worth it? Let's start with sound quality. Waves is an older company. They are one of the first to really crack into the plugin market in the late 90s and develop their Renaissance series in the early 2000s. And I do have to say that in my subjective opinion, I think that from a technical point of view, in terms of incurred distortion, transient smearing, depth, across the whole product line, things generally sound good, but I do not think that they necessarily have the best sounding plugins in today's market. Now, I do think that they are very, very good. And I want to add one other thing to that. Not only are they good, there are certain plugins that are really exceptional and do something special, sometimes in weird, unpredictable ways. For me, certain plugins like the Waves MV2 and RVox are just special plugins. I can't necessarily put a exact finger on it, but it's almost like they have a classic vibe to them that you just identify, you hear, and you go, oh yeah, that's that Wave sound. And then you have certain plugins like the SSL bus compressor, where from a more technical angle, there are better bus compressors, software bus compressors that emulate SSL style compression that you can use. But sometimes using the Waves one just does something that it's something about the swing, something about the tone, that even though it's not like perfectly right, somehow there's something really special going on. So with all of that said, on a scale of 1 to 5, I would say generally across the product line, probably a 3. It's good, but because there is that special kind of Wave sound, the Wave C6, for example, there's that just certain thing that it has, I'm going to bump it on up to 4 out of 5 stars in terms of sound quality. When you want that sound, it is the sound. Okay, workflow. This is where I think Waves really truly excels, and if you've seen some of my past videos, you know how important workflow is to me. Waves has this consistent ability to create low latency to zero latency, very low CPU plugins. And that is so useful when you're doing things like tracking sessions, when you're working off of a laptop that maybe isn't as strong as a more modern computer, desktop style computer. Having something that's going to work reliably, low CPU, translates across different systems, no problems, and also that other engineers just tend to have. So if you're trading files back and forth, sessions back and forth, and you don't want to have to commit everything, you can pretty reasonably expect most other engineers are going to have certain basic Waves products. And so that makes the workflow of everything really, really efficient. So my rating on Waves as far as workflow goes, 5 out of 5 stars, probably the best. Okay, selection. The idea of selection is if I only used Waves product, let's say that I subscribe to Waves, I get their whole product line, and I can only use their products to create a mix, do I think I can create a commercially viable mix without having to do mental gymnastics and backflips in order to make things work? And I would say with Waves, very comprehensive plugin list. I would give this one a 5 stars as well. Basically, anything you want to do, Waves is going to have a product that is going to allow you to do it. So far, we're doing really well. Now, let's get to customer consideration and service. This is where I'm going to have to show a little bit of tough love here. Waves needs to do better. I'm going to point out a few things that are really problematic with Waves, and I say this because I want Waves to address this stuff and say, okay, we can make these improvements. We probably remember the whole debacle with trying to go to a subscription service only. Waves wanted to completely discontinue its for purchase downloads. The problem with this is that when you are using a subscription service, as soon as that subscription service expires, whether by choice, by accident, by whatever, you can no longer access any live sessions that contain those plugins. When you purchase something, you can continue to access them. And so there are reasons to do subscription and there are reasons to do purchase, and having the power to do both is very important for the customer. So to simply stop doing purchase downloads and go only subscription without really taking inventory of what the customers are looking for kind of speaks to the mentality of the company, which is not to be customer first. Now, they since reversed that stance, but there are certain things left over from it that just sort of illustrate that as a company, Waves does not always put the customer first. The first one is the licensing and how that's managed. You do not use an iLock with Waves. You store the Waves licenses on a hard drive. And the problem with that is if you store the Waves licenses on your computer and then you go, like your desktop computer, and then you go somewhere else to do a session, you have not brought those licenses with you. You can no longer access your plugins in that session, but you're allowed to make that mistake one time. Waves allows you to do a rescan and put those licenses on another device as long as you're signed into their Waves Central hub. But once you do it that one time, don't make that mistake again, because if you do, you're not going to be able to transfer your licenses. So you have to do what I've done, which is put your licenses on a solid state portable drive. The problem with doing this is that if your drive gets lost, stolen, or damaged, you might just be SOL. And that's really problematic because then you have to contact Waves customer support and get them to reinstate your licenses, and that process is just really going to take too long for a modern session engineer. You kind of need your stuff immediately. So I do not like this policy. I understand where Waves is coming from. They are doing their best to create convenience and prevent piracy at the same time. And as far as plugin companies go, I don't think any company has experienced as much trauma as Waves. They got hit real hard with piracy, so I get it, but again, we have to put the customers first, and we need to make sure that customers who have made purchases, whether it's subscription or whether it's a just hard download, can access what they've paid for. Now, updates. Waves is one of the few companies that does not do free updates, and I believe that they've actually discontinued their update plan. Now, I understand that you need to pay somebody to do updates for your product. However, to ask the customer to do it is no longer competitive within the market, and it's not even really fully available anymore. I don't believe you can even do updates on every single product. In fact, if you go into Wave Central here, you'll notice that if you're in your products section, not all of these products can be manually downloaded and installed. You can do it from the Waves Creative Access and put all of the plugins on your computer, which also is a little annoying. Sometimes I wish that you could kind of just do it piecemeal and just pick the ones you want to put on there, because I don't always want 1,000 plugins on my computer. But okay, it is what it is. In order to access these older plugins, you have to download an older version of the client and then install them from there. I've tried to do this before. I ended up banging my head against the table. I ended up just saying the subscription service is worth it for me, and I paid for the subscription, but I kind of felt like I was being bullied into doing that because it's such a headache. They do not make it obvious how to get older plugins to be installed on more recent systems, and I do not believe that they're supported. Okay, so as far as customer service and consideration goes, on my scale of 1 to 5, I am going to give them a 2. Yikes. All right, price point. So let's pop on over here to Waves. Let's take a look. They're running a sale, buy 2 plugins, get 2 free. Pretty common for Waves to be putting plugins on sale. Also notice that their newer plugins, they discount right from the get-go here. So you're looking at $40 price points. Scrolling down, I'm seeing a lot of $40 price points. couple of $35, $25 price points. Most of the time, most of their plugins are discounted somewhere between about 25 and 40 bucks. And I think that that is a very, very highly competitive price point, especially for a company as well established as Waves. Now, there are plugins that are going to go for more. For example, the Clarity VX Pro, that's at $250 and discounted from $800. I think that if you're paying $800 for that's, it's that idea of putting it at a high price and then calling it a sale when in fact this is really like what the actual price should be. I think that when we're looking at price, it's really important to remember that it's about what the market is competing with. Putting a price on the development on plugins is really hard to do. It is actually really expensive and taxing to develop plugins. I've looked into it pretty extensively. So I can't say what is a fair price just based on, no rubric at all. All I can do is say these other companies are selling their products for these prices. Waves is selling their products for this price. How does that stack up? So as far as price point goes, this is probably about as good as you can get, with the exception of a couple of free things that sometimes people do, or some other forms of like compound pricing that can be offered. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars in terms of pricing. Now that brings me to the end of all this. Do I recommend Waves or do I not? So this is a really, really tough one. Probably the one that I've gone most back and forth on, because I don't think it's so easy to just blanketly say I like this company and product line or I don't like this company and product line. I really like the actual product. I really dislike some of the policies. I don't have a lot of confidence in Waves being considerate of the customer first, and so that makes it very, very, very challenging to make a blanket recommendation of a yes, which I want to. I really do. I would say this. If you are a working tracking or mixing engineer, it is probably worth getting Waves if you do not already have it. I think that the subscription is worth it, and it's just for the simplicity of the fact that you're going to oftentimes be trading files back and forth. You're going to be in situations where you're going to need zero latency, low CPU that has a decent sound. And, in general, you're never going to be out that much money. So I think that it is worthwhile. I think that if you're more insular in terms of what you're doing, you're making your own productions, you're not communicating as much with outside engineers and producers, stuff like that, I think that it's okay to probably skip Waves or at least do it piecemeal. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because you might purchase a Waves product and then it might not be available anymore for you in 5 years. And the fact that I don't have confidence in that makes me feel like I could not recommend it to everybody. So I think you have to really weigh your resources and your funds and your time in terms of whether or not this is really going to be worth it for you. And I'm going to have to leave it at that. So sorry, I don't have a more concrete answer, but just is what it is. I hope that Waves sees this video and they are able to address some of these concerns and do a little better moving forward. Okay, so let's wrap this up here. If you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell so you get notified. If you've had experiences with Waves, good or bad, leave that in the comment section below, because like I said, these are just my experiences and my opinions. They might not fall in line with yours, and they certainly are not comprehensive or representative of everyone out there. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.